The guns fell silent on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. But the silence that followed was not one of peace. It was a heavy, echoing void left by the cataclysm that was the Great War. Across Europe, the landscape bore witness to 4 years of unprecedented destruction. What were once vibrant fields and forests were now nightmarish moonscapes, pockmarked with craters, scorched by fire, and laced with the skeletal remains of trenches. Villages and towns, once homes to thousands, were reduced to heaps of rubble, their church spires toppled, their streets erased. The war had ended, but the world was left to grapple with its ghost. The human cost was staggering, almost beyond comprehension. In makeshift hospitals and crowded medical tents, the price of victory and defeat was paid in flesh and blood. Nurses, exhausted but resolute, moved through endless rows of wounded men. The term shell shock entered the world's vocabulary, a name for the invisible wounds that left men trembling, sleepless, and haunted by memories they could never escape. These were the survivors, the men who returned home, but a part of them remained forever buried in the mud of Flanders or the forests of the Argonne. To truly grasp the scale of the loss, we must look at the numbers, not as abstract statistics, but as individual lives extinguished. Over 16 million people, soldiers, and civilians perished. Imagine rows upon rows of white crosses, stretching as far as the eye can see, marching over the hills of military cemeteries. Imagine mass graves, hastily dug to contain the fallen. Picture the heart-wrenching scenes in every town and city, as families lined up for days, clutching faded photographs, desperately scanning lists for the names of missing husbands, sons, and fathers. In countless homes, an empty chair at the dinner table became a permanent, silent memorial to the lost generation, the brightest and best, who marched off to war in the summer of 1914 and never returned. The war didn't just destroy lives. It shattered the very foundations of the global economy. The industrial heartlands of Europe lay in ruins. Factories with their smokestacks broken stood silent, their machinery twisted and rusted. Farmland, the source of life, was torn apart by millions of shell holes and contaminated with unexploded ordnance, making it unusable for years to come. In the grand cities of London, Paris, and Berlin, the victory parades were short-lived, replaced by the grim reality of food shortages. Long bread lines snaked through the streets, and ration cards became a symbol of post-war austerity. Amid the rubble, the slow, arduous work of rebuilding began. Workers, many of them returning soldiers, painstakingly repaired shattered railways, cleared debris, and laid the first bricks of a new, uncertain future. The political map of the world was redrawn with a brutal and unforgiving hand. 4 great empires that had dominated the globe for centuries, the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, and the Russian, crumbled into dust. From their ashes, a host of new nations emerged, their borders often drawn with little regard for the ethnic and cultural realities on the ground. In the opulent Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, diplomats gathered to forge a new world order. The resulting treaty, intended to ensure a lasting peace, instead sowed the seeds of future conflict. Germany, burdened with crippling reparations and the war guilt clause, was left humiliated and resentful. Across the continent, the post-war years were marked by instability, poverty, and political unrest, creating a fertile ground for the rise of extremist ideologies that would plunge the world into darkness once more. The war's impact rippled across the globe, reaching far beyond the battlefields of Europe. Colonial soldiers from Africa, India, and the Caribbean returned home, their eyes open to the world and the hypocrisy of their imperial masters. They had fought for freedom and democracy, yet were denied it in their own lands. Their experiences would fuel independence movements for decades to come. As troops demobilized and traveled home, they unwittingly carried a silent, invisible killer, the 1918 influenza pandemic. This Spanish flu spread like wildfire through a world already weakened by war, claiming an estimated 50 million more lives, far more than the war itself. Yet, amidst the destruction, there were glimmers of profound social change. With millions of men at the front, women had entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, taking on roles in factories, farms, and offices. This newfound economic independence helped fuel the fight for suffrage and forever altered the role of women in society. But for the soldiers who came home, the world they returned to was often unrecognizable. Some found their towns and villages had literally ceased to exist, wiped off the map.